Step back in time to one of the most harrowing chapters of the Vietnam War as we delve deep into the heart of the Battle of Hue. This YouTube video takes you on a gripping journey through the blood-soaked streets and crumbling buildings of Hue City, where American and South Vietnamese forces clashed against the entrenched North Vietnamese Army and Viet Cong. Join us as we uncover the untold stories, the strategic complexities, and the sheer brutality of this pivotal moment in history. Highway 1, passing through the city of Hue, was an important supply line for the ARVN and U.S. forces from the coastal city of Da Nang to the Vietnamese demilitarized zone, the de facto border between North and South Vietnam, only 50 kilometers to the north of Hue. The highway also provided access to the Perfume River at the point where the river ran through Hue, dividing the city into northern and southern parts. Hue was also a base for United States Navy supply boats. Due to the Tet holidays, large numbers of ARVN forces were on leave, and the city was poorly defended. The PAVN and VC launched the Tet offensive, attacking hundreds of military targets and population centers across the country, including Hue. The PAVN-VC forces rapidly occupied most of the city. Over the next month, they were gradually driven out during intense house-to-house fighting led by the Marines and ARVN. In the end, although the Allies declared a military victory, the city of Hue was virtually destroyed, and more than 5,000 civilians were killed, including more than 2,000 of them executed by the PAVN and VC. The PAVN-VC lost somewhere between 1,042 and 5,133 killed, while Allied forces lost 668 dead and 3,707 wounded. On January 31, 1968, the first day of the Tet offensive, the PAVN and VC launched their attack on Hue. Under the cover of darkness, communist forces infiltrated the city, targeting key government buildings, military installations, and communication centers. The initial assault caught the South Vietnamese and American forces by surprise, as they were unprepared for such a large-scale offensive during the Tet holiday. The fighting in Hue was intense and chaotic from the outset. Street battles erupted as communist forces engaged in close-quarters combat with South Vietnamese and American troops. The ancient Citadel, a massive fortress that had withstood centuries of conflict, became a focal point of the fighting. The PAVN and VC used guerrilla tactics, including ambushes, booby traps, and sniper fire, to gain ground and inflict casualties on the defenders. The battle for Hue quickly devolved into a brutal urban warfare scenario. The narrow alleyways and fortified buildings of the city provided ample cover for the communist forces, who were adept at blending in with the civilian population. South Vietnamese and American troops found themselves facing an elusive enemy that struck swiftly and then melted back into the urban landscape. One of the defining moments of the battle for Hue was the siege of the Citadel. This ancient fortress, surrounded by thick walls and moats, was a symbol of imperial power in Vietnam. The PAVN and VC recognized its strategic importance and launched a determined assault to capture it. The fighting around the Citadel was particularly intense, as both sides fought tooth and nail for control of this key position. The communist forces used sappers to breach the walls and tunnels to infiltrate the defenses, while the defenders mounted a desperate resistance, determined to hold the line at all costs. By early February, the PAVN and VC had secured most of the city, including the Citadel. One of the key challenges faced by the ARVN and U.S. forces was coordinating their efforts effectively. The operation to retake Hue required close cooperation between ground troops, armored units, artillery support, and air support. Specialized units such as the U.S. Marines and the RVN Rangers played crucial roles in executing a specific task within the broader campaign. The first phase of the operation involved clearing enemy forces from the outskirts of Hue and establishing secure perimeters around the city. This required conducting systematic sweeps of villages, hamlets, and rural areas where communist forces were known to be hiding. The goal was to root out pockets of resistance and prevent enemy reinforcements from reaching the urban center. Once the perimeter was secured, the ARVN and U.S. forces moved into the city itself, engaging in intense urban combat with the PAVN and VC. Street by street, house by house fighting became the norm as both sides battled for control of key intersections, buildings, and strategic positions. The narrow alleyways and fortified structures of Hue presented significant challenges for advancing troops, who had to contend with booby traps, snipers, and ambushes at every turn. The Citadel was one of the main objectives for the ARVN and U.S. forces. Its formidable walls and moats made it a formidable defensive position for the Communist forces, who had fortified it with bunkers, tunnels, and machine gun nests. The siege of the Citadel was a protracted affair, with the attackers employing a combination of artillery barrages, airstrikes, and infantry assaults to break through the defenses. Throughout the operation, the ARVN and U.S. forces were mindful of the need to protect the civilian population and minimize collateral damage. Efforts were made to evacuate civilians from areas of heavy fighting and provide humanitarian assistance to those in need. In addition to conventional military operations, the ARVN and U.S. forces also employed counterinsurgency tactics to undermine support for the communist forces among the local population. This included conducting outreach programs, providing essential services, and establishing secure areas where civilians could seek refuge from the fighting. Winning the hearts and minds of the people was seen as essential to the long-term success of the operation. Air power played a crucial role in supporting ground operations and softening enemy defenses. U.S. aircraft conducted bombing runs, strafing runs, and reconnaissance missions to disrupt enemy movements and provide close air support to ground troops. Despite heavy resistance from the PAVN and VC, by mid-February, they had succeeded in driving the communist forces out of the city center and secured the Citadel and government buildings. However, pockets of resistance remained in outlying areas, requiring continued mopping up operations to eliminate the last vestiges. As they seized control of the city, communist forces targeted individuals perceived as collaborators with the South Vietnamese government or the United States. This included government officials, police officers, intellectuals, and members of the military. Yet perhaps the most notorious aspect of the massacre was the systematic targeting of civilians, particularly those associated with the South Vietnamese regime or suspected of harboring anti-communist sentiments. Hundreds of civilians were rounded up, interrogated, and summarily executed. Many were killed in mass shootings or by other brutal means. Their bodies were often dumped in mass graves or left on the streets as a warning to others. The exact number of victims remains unknown, with estimates ranging from several hundred to over 1,000. The massacre shocked those who witnessed its aftermath and galvanized international outrage. News of the atrocities spread quickly, fueled by journalists and photographers who captured the grim reality of the situation. For many Americans, the events in Hue shattered the illusion of progress in the Vietnam War. The United States had long portrayed its involvement as a fight against communism and for the protection of South Vietnam's freedom. However, the brutality of the massacre called into question the moral high ground of American intervention. The massacre also had profound implications within Vietnam. It deepened divisions between the North and South, further eroding trust and fueling resentment. In the eyes of many South Vietnamese, the communist forces had revealed their true nature as ruthless oppressors. In the aftermath of the massacre, efforts were made to investigate and document the atrocities. International organizations and human rights groups sought to hold those responsible to account. However, achieving justice proved difficult. As we wrap up our examination of the Battle of Hue, it's evident that this harrowing conflict encapsulates the complexities and tragedies of war. From the initial surprise attack to the brutal occupation and subsequent atrocities, Hue stands as a poignant reminder of the human cost of armed conflict. It's imperative that we honor the memory of the victims and learn from the mistakes of the past to strive for a future of peace and understanding. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more historical insights. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.